Great. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Yvette Garcia-Misri, and I'm the Executive Director for the Wilson Center for Science and Justice at Duke Law. For those of you who are not familiar with the Wilson Center, our mission is to advance criminal justice reform and equity through science and the law. We engage with community stakeholders, academics, and policymakers to translate interdisciplinary research into effective and practical policy. We focus on the areas of accuracy of evidence, equity in outcomes, and behavioral health. We're absolutely delighted to have you with us here tonight for what promises to be an inspiring and thought-provoking panel. This evening's event is the result of a very unique collaboration that brings together the worlds of art, academia, and social justice. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our co-sponsors and partners in this event. We're honored to partner tonight with the Nasher, Duke Law Alumni and Development Office, Duke Law Triangle, FHI Social Practice Lab, Duke Artistic Research Initiative that is supported by the Mellon Foundation, Duke Arts, and the Department of Art, Art History, and Visual Studies. Tonight's panel is inspired by the work of artist Cheryl Rowland, whose exhibit Processing Systems, Numbers is currently on display right across the way in the Incubator Gallery. If you haven't seen the exhibit yet, we encourage you to check it out after this panel. The works in Cheryl's exhibit are part of a cross-disciplinary project that critically examines the United States federal and state correctional identification numbers, which are assigned to inmates upon incarceration and have historically been used to reduce individuals to really a series of digits. Cheryl, who was wrongfully incarcerated in 2013, uses this numeric system to generate artwork that follows specific rules, like the Sudoku puzzles that helped him pass the time while he was in prison. In addition to Cheryl, you'll hear from 3 other panelists tonight. James Coleman is the John S. Bradway Distinguished Professor of the Practice of Law and the Director of the Wrongful Convictions Clinic and the Director of the Center for Criminal Justice and Professional Responsibility at Duke Law. Alana Fogel is an Assistant Clinical Professor of Law and the Director of Duke Law's Criminal Defense Clinic. And finally, Max Tinter is a second-year law student and member of Duke's Law Class of 2026. Max is also a research assistant with the Wilson Center and a member of the Duke Decarceration Project. And last but not least, moderating tonight's panel is Lindsay Bass-Patel. Lindsay is a policy analyst with the Wilson Center. Prior to joining the Wilson Center, Lindsay worked as a post-conviction attorney for 12 years, and her work now focuses on fines and fees reduction, low-level policing reform, bail reform, and second chances for people sentenced to life and long sentences. Thank you again so much for joining us. Directly after this panel, there will be a reception right outside in the Great Hall. And again, Cheryl's exhibit is also available for viewing. So without further ado, let's get things started, and I'll hand things over to Lindsay. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. I really appreciate you all being here with us tonight, and I am so excited to explore Cheryl Rowland's extraordinary art exhibit and talk about the issues that he highlights with these experts on the stage with us. We'll talk for about an hour, and then we'll have time for a few questions from the audience. In North Carolina, 300,000 people are released from jail or prison every year. Folks are released after spending varying amounts of time in custody. On average, if somebody's leaving prison, they have served about 3 years. Jail is more of a revolving door, and maybe you've only spent 2 or 3 days, maybe a few weeks, maybe months, up to a year or longer. But no matter how long they have stayed in jail or prison, we see over and over how disruptive it is when someone is taken from their home, from their community, and warehoused. It is an interruption. It causes chaos for them and for their loved ones. I'm excited to talk through those collateral consequences of what may seem like a simple arrest. We have 53 prisons in North Carolina, where 31,000 people are housed, plus county jails and federal facilities and juvenile facilities. It costs about $130 per day to house someone in a state prison. We also have about 75,000 people under community supervision. So that means they have extra strict rules to follow. They can stay at home, but if they break those rules, they will be sent to prison. So you can see a lot of people in our state are involved to varying degrees with the criminal legal system. And they're referred to as a case number, like 24 CRS 53371. And then it transitions to a jail or prison identification number, 984-555. And they're never again referred to by their name, Mr. Eric Santiago, by the state authorities. And this system continues to impact people even after their release. There are 2 million North Carolinians with a criminal record and who are trying to start a new chapter. We hear stories about how hard it is to begin again. Plus, their loved ones are dealing with this incarceration and the impacts of the legal system. The ripples just extend really far out. So one of the most difficult and heartbreaking parts of the criminal legal system that I have so much trouble wrapping my head around is when people are wrongfully incarcerated. Mr. Rowland, your exhibit focuses on people who are wrongfully incarcerated, and it's a portrait of some of these people. And you've been able to combine Sudoku, their prison or jail identification numbers, the structure and architecture of prison. You've used shading in the numbers in your artwork to represent jail, like bars and fencing. It's just extraordinary. Tell me, who are these portraits of, and why create them based on Sudoku?
Thank you. I learned a lot in that opening passage. I don't actually share the names of those individuals. One, because I've never met them, and I don't have their permission to. So I want to also be respectful of not. The show that I have at the Ackland, I do. It's just me and my father's whose portraits that are there. But nonetheless, I do hope that if any of these individuals do come, that they will be able to, because it's a portraiture, just in the reverse way. It's not a portrait that displays, their favorite color, their favorite textile to wear, or, shirt to wear, or how they want to be kind of remembered. It's more just to speak to the system that they were in touch with. And so the number itself is used, but it's also scattered. It's not in sequential order. So it's another way of kind of masking their identity, one, out of respect to. And then also, if you pay attention to the titles of the work, the portrait, it's titled Portrait, £, and a series of numbers. And those numbers are the amount of days that they spent wrongfully incarcerated. And I have no idea what that was like for them. I know for me that even though I have a time that's also attached to my portrait that's at the Ackland, mine is 318 days. But this assessment of what time is worth, a moment could be worth millions or trillions, who knows. So those days are days if you count for hours, seconds, and minutes, but in moments you miss, it's kind of like things you can't measure. So in choosing them, I chose them because of the space here and the community here. And just for those who come to see the show, it's a way of kind of reconnecting with people that could be you, as a way of not knowing them, but it could be you. And as a way of touching back to the community that you are in, and that it happened here within this county.
So being processed by a jail really dehumanizes you. I've talked to previous clients about how little autonomy they have when they wake up, what they eat for breakfast, what clothes are they going to wear, what do they do all day? Are they going to get clean clothes? Are they going to get their visit approved with their family? Will they be able to hug their family once they come? They're also surrounded by thick concrete walls, high barbed wire fences, and very little nature. And those are tough conditions, even without thinking about the power dynamic with an officer and the time spent in solitary confinement. Professor Coleman, you represent people after they've been convicted. Have you also seen these types of impacts on the people you represent?
Well, so we see the system at its worst, where it's failed, and our clients have spent years and sometimes decades in prison. And when they come out, they are not prepared and have not been prepared to manage their own lives, let alone manage being free and not having the strict controls that they had when they were in prison. I think the problem is that, you know, we call it a criminal justice system, but it's not really a system. It's sort of a collection of people who view themselves as law enforcement officers, and that their job is to catch people, convict them, and put them in prison and try to keep them there. So we try to get them out when they don't belong there.
And when they come to you, you know, you're kind of their last hope, aren't you? They have been through probably a trial, an appeal, maybe the post-conviction process or the motion for appropriate relief. Now, you get to do sort of a post-mortem of what's gone wrong, and you found many people are innocent, but they're convicted anyway. And how does this happen? What kinds of evidence is being used and then found to be faulty? Aren't there supposed to be legal safeguards?
Well, in theory, we have a system that checks itself. We have the trial, we have the judge, we have the appeal. The problem is that I don't think any of them really focus on trying to achieve justice. I think that once there's a conviction, and it doesn't matter if the investigation was incomplete or inadequate, once they pick out a person to charge, they try to convict that person. They stop looking for evidence that the person might not be the one who committed the crime. And then once the person is convicted, then, you know, it basically everything starts over, and now the burden is on the individual or on us representing him to try to prove that they got the wrong person. And you would think that in a situation like that, where, you know, we have evidence that, in fact, they may have convicted the wrong person, that they would, you know, they would be interested in trying to determine if that, in fact, is true. They're not. They're totally indifferent. And so we, a lot of times, we're able to get an exoneration over the indifference of the people who run the system.
Professor Fogel, you've worked with clients involved in federal charges, state charges. Some are facing a very long sentence in prison. Some, it may seem like a minor charge. Have you seen people feel pressured to plead guilty for all sorts of reasons? And could you tell us about why someone would plead guilty if maybe they didn't do it?
Sure, I've seen that once or twice. Yeah, so absolutely. Folks feel pressure to accept guilty pleas, even when innocent, or, you know, even when there is insufficient evidence to prove their guilt, which I think is an important distinction, but is sort of at the core of the system, is there is a spectrum, right, between absolute innocence and proven guilt. And what we do on the pretrial or trial level in our representation is try and hold the state or the federal government to that very, very high burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and hold the line where the evidence isn't there, or where evidence was problematically attained, or there are other legal issues. But the pressure that our clients face to make decisions either quickly, or generally quickly, or under the coercion of the offer of time served in lower level cases that have shorter sentences, where the time it would take to get to that moment of trial and having to put the evidence to the test would take so much longer due to systemic backlogs, due to over-policing that leads to so many cases in the system, due to lack of an exercise of discretion at the prosecution level to drop those cases, that, even if there's a very tenuous case against you, if somebody comes in and says, you've been in a cage for 30 days and you can walk out today, but you've got to take another notch on your record and make it even more difficult for you to get restabilized and back to work, it is very hard to have a conversation with that client about, let's see if we can and put them to their proof. And our job is to honor our clients' wishes, right? My desire to test that evidence means nothing. I don't have to spend a day of my life in custody, so that is always the client's choice, and we honor that. But it's inherently coercive, of course, right? And your fail-safe there is to try and argue for release pre-trial by making a motion for bond or reconsideration of bond. But folks have been through that, right? That's what sets the tone at their very first appearance of court. They've already had that moment and already been dismissed by the decision maker, and they know that's the person who's going to make the next decision in their case too. So yes, very coercive in that way. And then on the more lengthy end of the sentences, some of those federal mandatory minimum sentences are coercive in a different way, right? You're not getting folks out on time served who are looking at least 10 years. But many times the offers are ones that will allow you to get below the mandatory minimum if you move quickly or don't file legal motions. So the waiving rights in exchange for less time is often the other side of the coercive choice that folks face, and the pressure they feel and are put to accept and admit their guilt despite us often not knowing the state of the evidence at the point that those decisions are made.
And you're talking about people stuck in jail pre-trial, so they have not been convicted of anything, but they're too poor to be released. So tell me more about how poverty and racism impact these decisions by lawmakers, or how people end up in these situations.
Yeah, I think great point, and worth sort of pausing on for a moment to emphasize, right? We have this system of determining pretrial custody status, so whether somebody's going to be in jail before they're convicted or not. And you're absolutely right. Like, we tend to use money as a proxy. What it's meant to be is whether the person is so dangerous to the community that they must be detained for public safety reasons, or they are such a risk of flight that they would never come back to court, and so once again must be held in custody until the process does what the process does. But the reality is that it becomes a question of how much money do you have, right? I started my career in state court in Boston. Folks were held on $100 bails, right? Like, not no money, but money you would certainly pay to get out of jail if you had it. Many times you'll see numbers in the thousands, certainly tens of thousands. But is that if you're able, or you have the family or community resources to pull together $5,000 to attain your freedom, does that make you less dangerous? Does that make you more likely to come back to court? It's a very rude proxy, if I'm being, as polite as I can about. And I lost track of the second part of your question on that small diatribe.
I loved your diatribe. That was great. That was great. I keep thinking about the folks in Western North Carolina right now. People in prison and in jails have been evacuated. There's been 2,000 people who were being housed in prisons, transferred to different facilities, and then there's hundreds of people in jail who are going to be missing their court date when maybe they would bond out, or maybe they would get to take a favorable plea offer that they want to. They're missing their court dates, or maybe they're facing pressure to take a plea to get back to their family. They may not have been in touch with their family. They may want to get home and try to help rebuild their own house, their own community. Being away from their family is just, it's punitive when folks haven't even been convicted of anything. And it's disruptive for children as well, seeing their parents incarcerated. Looking at the end of somebody's sentence, maybe you can make it through and you have your coping skills. Maybe we can talk about that too, but you get to leave those thick concrete walls. You finally get to have more fresh air. But it's really hard to shake that dehumanizing prison identification number, that feeling of just being watched, being oppressed, being controlled. And so even without those walls, can any of you speak to how the experience in prison still impacts someone once they leave and they're trying to get back up on their feet?
I'll be quick this time. I think the most obvious and apparent way that it impacts folks is that they're generally still under supervision once they're released. So many folks who are released are done on parole or supervised release, some sort of post-custody supervision. And then, so their freedom is conditional at that point still. They're out, but they're subject to lower standards for the police to search them. They can be called in and brought back into custody on lesser burdens than even the first time around when somebody had to prove that they'd committed a crime. And then beyond that, right, the system of policing serves to make that manifest in folks' daily lives, which is felt even more so by people who have experienced that in their personal experience. You pointed out that folks, individuals as well as families, are impacted by these systems, but it's also felt on a community level, especially communities that are over-policed. That is just a constant, literal, physical, visual presence. And if you've been traumatized, victimized, and convicted and held under that system, seeing that presence is more visceral, I think, for folks once they're out.
Yeah, I'd say absolutely. I had probation time once I got out. I didn't get exonerated till like almost a year and a half after my release. So even in my probation time, I'm from Asheville, North Carolina, but I was not allowed to leave D.C. once I got released. And the immediacy of that system per se, like I was released late. My wake up was supposed to be at 6 a.m. and I didn't get released out of jail until 4:30 in the afternoon. And I had to make my probation officer's office to check in upon that release in order to not, have an infraction before they left for the office. And after leaving, I had, no place to go because I'm not from D.C. So there was a number of things that I had to kind of sort out that afternoon, late afternoon. And so the person who came to pick me up was in College Park, but that's actually outside of my 60 miles or whatever the DMV limits was. It was also like telling them that the closest relative I have is on the metro at College Park from City Central, D.C. Was too far, And there was a story I was just having with a friend of mine. While I was on probation, my grandmother passed away in her funeral, and so I requested to go back to North Carolina to attend this funeral, and they told me no. So now that I'm not involved no more, I went anyways. And I caught a ride from my said cousin who lives in College Park, and we drove down. And on the way back up, something was in the road and her husband swerved. I was in the back seat. She was in the passenger. He was driving. And he swerved, and we did a couple 360s to the point where we veered off the road in reverse down the side. And we're spinning, so I'm not sure if we hit a thing or not. And he's checking on my cousin. And this is a cousin that's like my sister, but I'm in the back panicking. Like, the system has, put me through so much trauma that I have no concern at all, other than that I can't stay here because I can violate my probation and go back to jail if I'm caught. So it was like to those type of like priority switches of how like severe it can be to where it clouds like, judgment and stuff like that.
Yeah, and if I may, too, just the physical record that gets pulled up every time someone searches your name lasts a long time here in North Carolina, and that impacts access to housing, employment, benefits. Depending on what's in your record, depends on how long you have before you're even eligible for it to get off. Just being arrested and charged does not come off your record until you ask for it to come off your record. And many people don't know that it's still on their record because they think once they're done, they weren't even convicted of anything. Why would it still be on your record? And it's not until they have trouble accessing housing or a job or something else where they actually come to realize this. So in addition to all of these, deeply traumatic and internal pressures that come with leaving the system, there's still a paper trail that's going to follow you for a long time that's going to absolutely color the way you move about the world and the way other people view you and choose to interact with you.
Well, our clients spend, as I said, years and decades in prison. When they go in, their life stops, right? Their life stops, and they are under complete control of the prison. And then 30 years later, they're released. The rest of the world kept going, and they are at the same place they were when they went in, and they have to adjust. Most of them have, lost contact with people they knew. They're put out on the street. They can't get a job. They're in poor health. They're almost always suffering from PTSD. And so, they're a wreck, honestly. And one of the things that we discovered in the course of our work is that getting our clients out of prison by showing that they were innocent turns out to be the easy part. Trying to help them to have a life once they get out is the really difficult part, and we haven't mastered that yet.
That's really telling because you work really hard on those cases to get them out. That part takes years too. And for those years, Professor Coleman, how do your clients stay patient and sane?
I have no idea, honestly. Some of them come out and that their attitude is extraordinary. They don't appear to be bitter. I think they are, but I think they've learned to suppress it in order to get through the day in prison. I know I would be angry, and I would be angry every day I was in there, and I would be angry when I got out. But, that works against you. So they figure that out, and they adjust. And then when they get out, I think all of the problems and emotions that they've suppressed sort of come to the forefront.
Mr. Tinter, a second-year law student thinking about coming into this dark, dark world. Now, what projects have you been involved in at Duke Law, and what has surprised you?
I'm really glad you asked me this ahead of time because I've been thinking about it for the last few days. I came to law school to be a part of this world and do this work. I spent my time in undergrad exploring this world, and in between undergrad and law school working for a public defender's office. And since being here, Duke's got a lot of really cool ways to tap in. You heard that I do research with the Wilson Center, which is measuring and trying to assess sentence severity across North Carolina. I work with the Fair Chance Project, which tries to get some records expunged and get, fresh starts for a lot of folks. And the Duke Decarceration Project, which just says you've been in prison too long. How can we get you out? Is it in a sentence? And the more I thought about your question about what surprises me most, I kind of split it into two categories of things that surprise people when I tell them about it that aren't involved in this work, because that should continue to surprise us. And I think that's just kind of how we use incarceration for things that we really shouldn't. That people who get caught stealing diapers go to jail. People who write a false check at the grocery store because they can't afford groceries otherwise get arrested. People who's clearly having a mental health crisis but doesn't have a home to go back to are arrested and sent to custody. And those things should absolutely surprise us. And to use the number you gave earlier, it costs $130 a day to incarcerate someone for stealing $50 worth of diapers. That's nuts. That's when I get my libertarian uncle on my side. That's when we're really cooking at Thanksgiving. Because he also thinks that's a waste of money, and that should be surprising to people, the depths of the inhumanity in that. And then for me, it's even once we get beyond those relatively, low crime things, right? Those were all misdemeanors. But we continue to double down on this system. And we have, and just kind of continue to accept this false choice. Once you've started committing what are considered felonies, either you go to prison or nothing happens to you. And that's kind of the only two options for a lot of crimes in this country. And for a country that prides itself on being, cutting edge and creative and ingenuity, it's kind of crazy that despite all of our knowledge and evidence that doesn't actually work, we keep going back to that. And that continues to surprise me. But I really wanted to bring up both of those because I think the former, no matter how long you do this work and no matter how much you interact with it, should continue to surprise you.
I like that, and I like your sense of humor. That will take you far as a
Thank you.
criminal defense attorney. Would you recommend to other students that they participate in pro bono projects?
I mean, I certainly would. Like I said, I came to law school to do this work, and there's a lot of really cool ways to tap in. If you just think that people who are arrested but not convicted shouldn't have something on their record, we have something for you. And if you're going to go all the way with me and think nobody should be in prison, we got something for you too. And anywhere in between, I think we hold a lot of privilege going to an institution like this that's got a lot of resources and a lot of really great ways to tap in and do work while you're a law student. I think we owe it to this community, to the state, and to the positions we're going to be in to use that for good.
Another group of people that I think about a lot impacted by the system are the kids who go to jail. They may be under 18, but they go to adult court and they go to adult facilities and they grow up behind bars surrounded by grown men or grown women, and they have officers, telling them what to do from the time they're teenagers. They don't really have mentors unless they can build relationships perhaps with other people in prison. I remember one person that I used to represent, he had a way of coping as he grew up in prison by becoming a dog trainer. And there's a program called New Leash on Life where he was able to spend the majority of his day with a dog from an animal shelter. And he was essentially just supposed to teach this dog some manners. And it was a way for him to connect with this unconditional love that he just really appreciated. It was a sense of purpose for him. And the saddest part of his day was when he had to put the dog back in the cage, go back to his own, home behind bars. Do you guys have any other stories about how people have been able to have a sense of self, a sense of purpose, a sense of being free even though they're locked up?
It's harder than it sounds. I know I struggled with it a good bit when I was inside a lot. It's a very depressing space. But there was an individual, I do believe I got lucky with with a lot of the men, a few of the men that I was in there with. One in particular, I think he's now like an elected official in D.C. He got elected while he was incarcerated. His name is Joel Caston, and he was somebody who came through for a parole status hearing. He went in at 18, and when I met him, he was well into his 40s. And so when he came through and got housed in the cell next to mine, me and my cellie, we just used to kind of sleep the day away. And he used to come through and just kind of beat on our bunks, get us up, and just kind of be a very big motivator. We didn't have weights or anything like that. We had a small gym in our housing unit. And as entertaining as it was in the beginning when I used to play, like it's a very small court and you run into the wall enough and sleep on a hard bunk that you're just like, it's not worth it because the infirmary just doesn't do anything. But nonetheless, there was no weights. He didn't care. We would work out. We couldn't go outside. He didn't care. We'll do it on the tier. Like, there's no excuse. You don't want to read the things you normally would read. There's books, plenty of books here. You ever want to learn a language? There's somebody here who speaks a language. Let's go have a conversation with them. Like, he felt no fault in this space, like found no excuse. And so we had one Wall Street Journal. He already had books on Amazon about stocks while being incarcerated, but he couldn't trade. But he taught us everything. We marked that one issue of Wall Street Journal newspaper up, and he taught us every day. And that was like, that day in, day out energy of this individual just was like, there was nothing we couldn't give him that was just like no excuse he wasn't taking it. And so that's like somebody that, I still communicate with to this day, that it's like even a space like that couldn't kind of suffocate his light. Or for him going through what he was in, he had like 20 to life, and he's out now, but he had made a mistake when he was young and has done a lot of work and continues to motivate. He built programs with Georgetown Law School while he was incarcerated. He's done a lot of work, and he didn't need to be out to do it. He found a way and a purpose, and it led to him getting out in a way.
I mean, far be it for me to add to your personal experience. I think from my perspective, what I've seen when I speak to my clients is they're often curious if I can help get in touch with family, encourage family members to come visit if maybe somebody hasn't been by in a while. And I think, my clients held close to those ties as a tether. But many times as an attorney, waiting to go in and visit clients, we'd be in line next to family members and thinking about, the theme of hidden costs of the system, watching how family members are treated, coming to visit their loved ones. I could see why folks might need a break and not do that as often as they might be entitled to, which isn't absolute, right? It's very restricted in terms of hours. Folks are subjected to strip searches. It's very invasive and dehumanizing even to family members coming to see their loved ones. So I think that's a tether many folks held dear, but also pervaded the hidden costs, I think.
I'm wondering if you all have ideas about how people like us can help make the system better. I can imagine there's some frustration in the audience. I know I feel frustrated daily. If you're just a normal person, what can you do to make this a little bit better?
I still feel very normal when it comes to the law and learning it.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm only a year into this.
Yeah. I just felt like, in hindsight, I felt that the law was a weapon that was used against me because it was so unknown to me. And the me relinquishing my power, my life into someone else's hands. Even with my short stint, I had court-appointed lawyers, single practitioner, and a law firm, and in a very real way learned the difference of like what is obtainable, and a lot of that is definitely a retainer like fee, and those results are very different. And that type of it's hard to just to know I didn't do anything and just to trust that someone can work this law, the theater of a law court, to kind of make this thing kind of work. I felt like I wanted that power. I wanted to know it myself. I wanted to also not weaponize it too much, but I wanted to arm the community so nobody else could have the potential of being taken advantage in that way, because it's a massive system. It's a massive machine. And when at the end of it, it's hard to put a face to a system. So that anger that's there, it's like I definitely could pick out the judge, but then when I really think about it, I'm like, it's not really the judge. I mean, it's a part, but it's not really it. And so, for the most part, like I've wrecked my brain in trying to think of like when should I have learned it. Like the Know Your Rights campaign type of situation, like even just the basics of some things. And as a professional artist, I'm learning more about contracts and not, like the law is everywhere. You sign terms and conditions for your cell phone bill, like it's everywhere. And that, is something that I found myself curious and always been attracted to getting close, to even having conversations, to learn a little more just through practice in that way. Even entertained going to school, but I figure if I jump in it, then I might as well go full force. I feel like it'll grab me in that way. Like it's one of those things.
When you enroll next year, I'll give you all my textbooks. I'll be ready to get rid of them.
Awesome. But real quick, to your point, I guess I'm trying, for your question, I'm trying in the same way. And mostly I'm just starting in my community, starting right whatever is right around me and trying to take a little bit at a time.
I think probably one of the most important things is to hold the people in the system accountable, don't let them get away with the kind of callous stuff that they get away with. When there are stories in the paper about situations where the police have hidden evidence or destroyed evidence, prosecutors have defended that kind of conduct, speak out about it. I think that it makes a difference. If we don't have prosecutors or an attorney general who care about justice as opposed to just putting people in prison, then these things aren't going to change. And I think the way that it will change is that, you let them know that you want them to be ministers of justice, which is what they always claim they are, except that if you look at what they do, it has very little to do with justice. Hold them accountable. Put it in their face. Tell them to be ministers of justice and care about that.
Totally agree. Show up and hold the line, right? The system is faceless, and I think by design feels like this huge monstrosity that there's no intervention point in. And obviously, those of us who are trial lawyers, it is our job to stand up and try and object, but the system occurs in everybody's name, right? Like prosecutors stand up and they say, for the people of the state of North Carolina or the government of the United States. Like you are their bosses, right? And we call you all into court to make the decisions. Like when somebody has a jury trial, it's not the lawyers and the judges who decide it. It's just random members of the community who did not figure out how to get out of jury duty, right? Like, so start thinking about it, not as in, oh man, here's the summons, what an inconvenience. Like that is a gift and an honor and should be a pleasure that you look forward to. Like just see what we're all talking about through your own eyes. But then if you are lucky enough, nobody will put me on a jury, right? Probably, whatever, but but you all might get on a jury, right? And then when you're sitting in the seat, like hold the evidence to the burden. Like it is the highest burden under our laws. It is a very big deal to say, I am convinced beyond reasonable doubt that this human being, neighbor of mine, member of my community, has run so afoul of our societal norms that they should be locked in a box, right? Like that's pretty serious. And that doesn't work if we all, like folks who care enough to come to this, don't want to participate in jury duty, don't vote, right? Like many of the folks involved in making the decisions in the system are elected. It is your system, so there is a lot of hope there, insofar as there's hope in folks showing up and caring about these issues. So that's my silver lining. It's yours, right? Own it and make it be what it ought to be.
So here's where the good news about being a law student comes in, is because I wasn't a legal professional, 18 months ago. And here's the also really good news, is so much of this is local, right? The system happens on a local level by and large. Unless we're talking about the feds, then it's generally county to county, which means a few dozen people like really do matter in all this. Also, the good news is we're in the Triangle, and the Triangle has an outsized number of really awesome organizations that people can get involved in. Check them out. We can talk. Let me know. I'll let you know which ones to go look up. But like, if you have a day, go sit in court and just be a court watcher. There's some evidence that suggests when random people are sitting in the courtroom, judges and prosecutors act a little better, for whatever that's worth. Maybe you sit in there. Maybe you wear a t-shirt that says court watcher and see how things change. I'm just saying. And there are organizations that will facilitate that for you and you can go in groups and you can make a day of it. It's an experience. I won't say it's a fun experience, but it's an experience. My grandfather thinks court's like it is on TV, and it is not that, but it will be interesting to you. You know, these local elections, these judicial elections, DA elections, because they're county-wide, every single vote makes a massive difference. So I just think, you know, it can seem very disconnected. It's hard to figure out what to do, in addition to all of our other, you know, social justice movement things, protests, policy advocacy, etc. The fact that this happens on a local level should be really encouraging to all of us because it means your individual impact really matters.
And one shocking number that I learned when I was a baby attorney is the percentage of cases that goes to trial rather than pleading guilty. 1%. 1% of people actually have a trial. And that is often due to these resources that are so shorthanded. So, you know, we also have to think about what is prioritized in the budget. Mr. Tinter, I keep thinking about something else you said about, you know, somebody stealing diapers, somebody needing money for groceries. Do you all think about upstream solutions as well? Are there common themes you see in cases that maybe we could think more creatively and provide some resources before anyone's ever charged?
I mean, just don't charge people for stealing diapers. It's a bit radical. But, I mean,
We use the criminal justice system to solve all of our problems. And I think that's part of the problem, is that any type of social problem can be, you know, dealt with by putting the person in prison. And we think we've solved the problem. We're just warehousing people to get them off the street, out of the sort of eyesight of the public who don't want to see them. So, you know, we're going to have to, I mean, it sounds like I'm in a college class in the 60s, but really, I mean, we're going to have to invest in, you know, some solutions to social problems other than prison. We're spending a lot of money on prisons and getting very little out of it other than taking people off the street for a few years, but we're not solving the problems. And that's what we need to be doing, is trying to figure out what are the problems that we can solve before people get caught up in the system. Once they're in the criminal justice system, they don't get out, basically.
Yeah, you know, we see many of the same drivers of what we label as criminal behavior, and very few solutions or positive interventions to address them, though it's not really at all a mystery. You know, like my clients who have committed violent crimes, like I represent guilty people also, you know, they have almost to a person experienced trauma, severe trauma in their own past. And, you know, this is the first intervention point that we're as a society stepping up for them, you know, not to help, but to punish. Drug dealing clients tend to be drug addicted clients, and just a tremendous amount of poverty offenses and manifestations of mental health.
Well, I'd love to bring it back to the art. Mr. Rowland, will you tell us a little bit about your other exhibit, the one that's at the Ackland Museum?
Yeah, it's still along the lines of using system-based systems to create work or art or portraiture. The ones at the Ackland are a tidbit larger. The ones that are in the other gallery are like 5 feet by 5 feet. The ones at the Ackland are 10 feet by 10 feet. They provide a little room for a little more information. So it's if you've ever played Sudoku out there, the one that's at the Ackland kind of illustrates step by step a little more, whereas the artwork that's here at the Nasher is all condensed in one puzzle. So if one puzzle, and then at the Ackland is step by step. But like I mentioned earlier, the two individuals that I chose are myself and my father. So this work isn't solely about, or I haven't been looking at caseworker individuals who are only wrongfully incarcerated. I've been finding multiple through lines and connections by having a number. So I've been incarcerated with folks who were on the same case, like multiple co-defendants, but they were also family members. And so this parallel of like being connected through the criminal justice system, but also in blood, also led me down some rabbit holes. And so that's the one in the Ackland is titled bonding, trying to use additional legal terms, but then also this bonding that kind of happens also on the other side of the fence with family members. So I found out that my dad was also formerly incarcerated, not wrongfully, but formerly incarcerated. And I didn't find that out till I hit of age and got in trouble when I was younger. And I am the third. So when they thought they were running my criminal history, they were actually running his. And so that's how I got introduced to that and got to see on a sheet what he was charged for. But in doing this work, I revisited his criminal history and dug a little deeper, found out where he was incarcerated, found the length to get the title of his portrait. His is 508. So he did a little more time than me. But then when I went to talk to my mom about it, she was like, what are you doing now? Like, kind of craziness are you into now? And I was like, you won't believe it. I was like, it's crazy. I'm making this portrait of my dad. He passed when I was 4 years old, so I really didn't get to know him too much. And I was like, yeah. I was like, did you know? He was like, this, that, and the fourth. She was like, what? She had no idea. And so it had all happened before she had met him, and they had me. So it was like, I was like, oh no. I stumbled into things nobody would have ever told me this stuff about him. I got the other things as I grew up, like, oh, you're starting to look more and more like your dad each day or something type of effect. But this is, again, like this other invisible life that has had, this other experience that only he knew, and that he was a part of a system, and the system knew him in this way. So that work is kind of like placing him and I together, and kind of seeing the differences of our numbers, which, oddly enough, I have two numbers. I have a North Carolina number and a DC number. So I use my North Carolina number. So in all of the puzzles out here, there are 3 digits that link everybody who was charged in North Carolina. And that is like 057. I think 058 is also a number if you guys check me on that. But so there's similarities in a way of the system that also links us as also being family in the system.
That's just beautiful. Thank you all very, very much. We have time for a few questions. If anybody from the audience has a question, we have someone with a microphone coming at you. There's one in the back.
Yeah, this is fascinating. So I'm a Duke law grad in 1994, kind of a M&A securities, didn't do any criminal justice in my legal career, but I've always been fascinated by this because I think it's a real issue and a real problem. And hearing about what could we do or what could Duke do, I will tell you my favorite class at Duke Law School, and I don't know, Professor Coleman, they do it now, but I took forensic psychiatry in my third year, which is a course that was joint taught by Duke Medical and Duke Law. And we went to Butner, the federal psychiatric hospital, and we talked about insanity cases, incompetency, absolutely fascinating. But what I would love to see Duke do is, I do believe that mental illness there's a pandemic and it affects everyone across the country, but all this trauma, I do think there's a lot of mental health needs. And I would love to see Duke Hospital, Duke Medical. I know, there's lots of great research and medical research being done, but to the extent that the law school could partner with the medical school at Duke, I don't know, but there's these upstream solutions or how prisons deliver, and probably not very well, but mental health care. But I just think, I love my forensic psychiatry class, and that was fascinating, but there's a much larger, that's a very small part of criminal law, probably, a lot of those cases. But I would love to see the university on a more trans-institutional, not just the law school and the public policy school, but maybe the medical school, how we can maybe better deliver and even teach law students and medical students side by side, but something maybe along those ideas I think would be wonderful. But I very much enjoyed tonight's panel.
Well, and I'd like to brag about the Wilson Center. We do have a psychiatrist, we have sociologists, we have different kinds of researchers. We are trying to be interdisciplinary because I agree there's can be some magic there. So we're able to do research and then make policy recommendations and then work with great students and great faculty as well to bring more light to these issues. So thank you. We can talk more about the Wilson Center after this.
You know about FIT? You know what FIT is? Does anyone know what FIT is? Okay. It's not at Duke, it's at UNC. And it was started by a doctor, a family physician, Evan Ashkin, who was working as a community health physician and discovered the damage that incarceration had caused within the Black community. So he started as a physician offering health care to people coming out of prison with chronic conditions, including substance abuse. And now he has partnered with a man who's a psychiatrist, Ted Zarzar, and they have a FIT program, which it connects the prisons with FIT, the regular health care, and psychiatric care. And they work very much with peer support specialists and social workers to also provide housing and stability, because that's a huge part of mental health issues for people coming out of prison. And it's one reason they go in. And it's just got a big grant, a $500,000 grant from the state. So it's a great model. It's a great beginning. Any kind of advocacy to expand that would be wonderful. And if the Wilson Center wants to get involved with FIT, all the better. Yeah. And I'm just going to say one thing, because I'm very involved. I have a podcast about prison reentry, and I've been working in this very closely with people with a reentry house over the past few years. We got to be careful not to victimize people, because then you paint them with a brush and you don't give them any autonomy either. I have met some really amazing people who have spent time in prison. I've also met a number of people who have said, "Thank God prison saved me." And the reason it saved them is because they needed to stop. They were on the streets. I agree, it's a social problem. But we've got to be careful. Not in academia, we have this tendency, and liberals have this real tendency to paint things with a very broad brush. And it is dehumanizing as a system. So just got to be careful, that's all.
I appreciate that perspective, and I completely agree. We must treat people as whole people, looking at their mental health beforehand, making sure they have housing afterward. I do appreciate FIT's model a lot. I think we have time for one more.
I just want to thank you. I'm a founder and executive director of Impartial, which is a criminal justice nonprofit here locally. And I was actually prosecuted for a crime I didn't commit. I did not go to prison, but working very actively. And I just wonder if Duke or places that you might know have very reliable sources of data to be able to examine some of the programs in the correctional facilities such that there can be studies done as what programs work and why. And we want to be able, as part of our programming, to take some of that data and do customization so that we can increase the probability of people not in a recidivism situation.
There's an answer from the gentleman in the back. He knows a lot about data and programs.
I work at the Wilson Center, and we actually do work with kids. We're a sub-grantee of the current grant. I'm probably okay. Thank you. The Department of Adult Correction put out a call for study of rehabilitative programming. We put in a proposal. They selected 2 North Carolina executive branch agencies to do that study rather than the Wilson Center. And they are not sure whether or not the results of the study of their own rehabilitative program will be made public. Yeah. So in terms of the calls for accountability, these are people in the executive branch staffed by people who are elected to be governor. And so if you would like the Department of Adult Correction to release the results of the study of their own rehabilitative programming, contact your local officials.
It's a very important point. Thank you. I have enjoyed this so much. Thank you very, very much for these thoughtful questions and this wonderful discussion. I love how art reflects the society that we're in and the one we may want to create. So thank you for your hard work and for sharing your story, and for you all also sharing your expertise, and you all for coming. We have a reception outside, so hopefully these conversations can continue. Thank you.